Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Yep, you dialed set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're with us in class today. Blake is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at GCN. I'm Vincent Finelli. If you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. We have a telephone listen line. It's up and running. If you'd like to call us, that number is 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, never mind me. I'm just dropping things in the dark here. I'm not sure if I was on air or not, but I just dropped the phone and I went, I pressed a button and, one of the speed dial things on my telephone. So anyway, I hope that you all didn't hear that.
Well, it's great to hear your voice, Guineith. I wanted to share something with you. About a week ago, I mentioned that farmers are really having a tough time. And I mentioned, the price of beef is very low. And that typical farmer in our neck of the woods is finding multiple challenges. One challenge is that our hay, a couple of weeks ago, was, for the first cutting of the season, was about 25% of what it had been previous year or previous years. And that meant that if those conditions continued, we would have 25% of the feed we need to get the cows through the winter, which means that farmers would have to sell their cows. And they would probably all figure it out about the same time. They'd say, we thought maybe it might rain. It doesn't look like it's going to rain. The grass isn't going to grow. We're going to have a major drought. We better sell the cows, while we can still get something for them. So they would sell the cows at a loss. It would cost more to feed them and keep them and raise them and so forth than they would get for them. And they'd sell them at a loss. And they'd probably all figure it out about the same time, which would drive prices way down, because the supply would be so great, all these farmers selling their cows into market for slaughter at the same time. So it would be a really terrible thing in terms of financial survival for cows. So the first whammy or the first hit the cattle farmers would take would be the hay crop. The second would be selling the cows. And the third would be the hay would be so scarce that the price of the hay, if they needed to buy it, would go up. And it has, by the way. It's gone up already. So I said that the next, and I mentioned that we saw an uptick in the number of suicides from taxi cab drivers because they can't compete with Uber. And the taxi medallions that the city would issue have been driven up to about the $1 million mark, where it costs about $1 million to buy a taxi medallion or lease one. And then there's the cost of the cabs. And so taxi drivers are in a business as well, and they're generally independent guys who are trying to make a living by renting or leasing a medallion, renting or leasing the cab, and then paying for the fuel and the maintenance and all that kind of thing. And when they're done at the end of the month, they've been finding out that they're in the hole. They're losing money month after month, and some have killed themselves. And that made the news. Well, I said the next one we're going to hear about is going to be the farmers. Farmers are going to be killing themselves, and we're going to start hearing about that. Well, here we are. Here we are. Yep, June 26th, 2018, and CBS News, mainstream news outlet, headlines: farmers in America are killing themselves in staggering numbers. And it goes on to say, think about trying to live today on an income you had 15 years ago. Think about that. Well, that's what's happening to farmers, except it's much worse, because I did a quick calculation, did a little bit of research, and the article's not quite right. Gasoline 15 years ago was $1.53 per gallon. Today, it's almost twice that much per gallon here in the United States. Goes on to say that that's how agriculture expert Chris Hurt describes the plight facing U.S. farmers today. Farmers are dying by suicide at a higher rate than any other occupational group, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. Let me say that again. Farmers are dying by suicide at a higher rate than any other occupational group, according to the CDC. So, here we are. Farmers are committing suicide because of financial despair. Now, I'm paraphrasing what this article is saying. Goes on to say that in the U.S., several longtime farm advocates say today's crisis mirrors the one that happened in the 1980s, when many U.S. farmers struggled economically with an accompanying spike in farmer suicides. The farm crisis was so bad, there was a terrible outbreak of suicide and depression. This is Jennifer Fahey, Communications Director with Farm Aid, a group founded in 1985 that advocates for farmers. Today, she said, I think it's actually worse. So there are hotlines that farmers can call, when they feel suicidal. But the problem is really kind of simple. The problem is that the equipment costs have gone up, up, up. Tractors have not gone down in price, they've gone up in price. Taxes from the government corporations keep going up. Fuel is more expensive. Maintenance parts, wow, way more expensive. Repair parts, way, way, way more expensive. And you put all that together, and then you find out that cows are selling for about the same price, just a little bit more. Cows are selling for just maybe 20 cents more a pound than they were selling in 1990. How do I know? Because we bought our first cows in 1990. So we paid $1.06 a pound for the cows back in 1990. And now they're selling for $1.26, $1.35 a pound. Unbelievable. So that's what's happening to farmers. Let me put another exclamation point on this. So we didn't want to. We had to buy 2 tires for our tractor. 18.4 by 38. That's the size. They weigh 324 pounds apiece. It takes several large, physically strong people to mount these tires on the rims. The rims are a couple hundred pounds apiece. So by the time you're done, you're looking at about 500 pounds per tire and rim assembly. So how much does that cost? Well, easily $50 a piece if you can, find someone who's going to do it for a low price for you, $50 each. How much are the tire tubes? Well, they're $65 each. How much are the tires? About $600 a piece. Okay, so by the time you're done, by the time you're done, now that's not the best tire. When you're done, you're looking at about $1,500 for 2 tires.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yep.
And that's just the back 2. Now the front, the front takes tires too. Now, how many tractor tires does a farmer have? Oh, geez. Let me just do a quick calculation. 1, 2, 3, 4. We probably have about 6 tractors. Okay, 6 times 4.
Yeah.
24. So if they average $300 a piece. It's so expensive to be a farmer that we can't seem to do it. And that's $9,600 worth of tires. Then you add to that, we have about 30 lead acid batteries that are used in equipment around here. And, we have equipment that some people might say, well, what do you need a backhoe for? Well, when a tree that is the diameter of a hula hoop lands on a fence and the cows can get out and leave, that's your inventory. They can just walk away. You got to get the tree off. Sometimes you have to bury a cow, that dies. And how do you do that with a shovel? I don't think so. You want to go down 6 feet? You want to dig a hole that's 9 feet deep, 8 feet deep, 6 feet wide, 8 feet long? How do you do that with a shovel?
Yep.
I mean, around where we live, it's rocks.
We had a similar situation a number of years ago. We had a horse die on this property. It was an aged horse. It was like 26 years old. And I had to euthanize and bury it. Something that is the least fun farm job that I have ever had. And it was in the middle of summer, which was the worst time both to dig and to have a rotten animal of that size around. And in the end, I think the dogs ended up eating it bit by bit by bit, but it took them about a month to do so. It was just because I couldn't dig in the soil. It was just too hard. And you would have a similar situation if a cow died there in the winter.
Absolutely, and you can smell it for about a mile. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs and I are live. I was off on my thumbnail calculation. I calculated a little closer. We have 48 tires here on the farm, 48, roughly. 4 tractors. Oh, shoot, I forgot the trailers. We have way over 48 tires. But I was just thinking tractors and implements, okay? At average of $300 a piece. I brought the average down because some of the tires are smaller. That's $14,400 for tires. And if we had to replace all of them every, 10 years, let's say we just say on average they last 10 years, that'd be $1,440 per year just for tires. And what I'm trying to say is that farmers are really having a tough time. But it's not like I'm saying, woe is me as a farmer. I'm just saying that here's what you can expect from my vantage point as a farmer. So farmers are going to go under. They're not going to be able to make it. They're going to default on their equipment. There are going to be sales of farm equipment. Farm equipment prices will plummet. And there'll be sales on animals. And, for cows, for example, and sheep, the prices will go down. Maybe you'll see a benefit at the supermarket for the short term. And then prices will go way up. And the reason I say that is because there'll be fewer farmers left, and there'll be more demand for the products that those farmers that are left are making. And the prices will go up just by supply and demand, not by greedy farmers, just by supply and demand. That's what I think is going to happen. But it's not just to farmers. There are all kinds of people who are in financial distress, who have lost their jobs. People who work at stores, retail stores, brick and mortar. Closings. I mean, Radio Shack. I mean, the list is endless. I mean, Sears, Kmart, they're closing stores all over the country. And I'm reading that stores are closing in Europe as well. And I would assume that you're probably seeing the same thing in Australia. Is that right, Guineith?
The economy around here in this local district, which is a rural farming district, there's an unemployment rate of something like 25%. So to put that in perspective, that even at the height of the Great Depression, they never had an unemployment rate higher than 10%. So that's pretty bad. And,
well, I believe our unemployment is at 25%. I've been saying that for a couple of years now, that I believe that we're at about 25%. And it's just not reported. It's just not reported.
No. So I have, just talking to some of the farmers around here, just as you're out and about and you meet a farmer and you get talking to them for a while, and the type of farming that happens around here is sheep and wheat farming, and that means that the farmer he has sheep, usually merinos, and he puts in a wheat crop each year and tries to feed his sheep. The hard season for us here is the summer. He tries to feed his sheep through the summer from the straw and the stubble from the wheat. And then, in addition to that, he sells the wheat, or he uses the wheat to feed the sheep as well. That's the farm size around here of what we call proper farmers. Full-on farmers who are multi-generational. The average ranch size or station size around here would have to be around about 5,000 or 10,000 acres. So we're talking about a big operation. But big operation means big equipment. And, at one time maybe you would have seen, a lot more new equipment heading down the road at sowing time, at barring time, at spraying time, at harvest time. But these days, the equipment that's heading down the road on trailers to go to paddock to do the wheat crop thing is not new equipment. It's old, it's rusty, it does its job, but it probably needs a lot of maintenance.
Hold that thought. We'll talk more about that. I recently bought 2 square balers, and I paid $150 each for them. That's the price of the scrap metal, literally the price of the scrap metal.
That's
the farmer,
not much for a square baler.
No, and I bought 2 of them. I bought the first one, and the farmer said, "Well, you know what? My son's got one. He'd be glad to sell it too." And so I said, "Well, how much do you think he'd want for his?" He said, "Well, same one as I got for mine. I charged you $150. That's what I wanted. That's what you paid." And he probably wants the same thing. So my son and I went over with our equipment, and we hooked it up to the truck and took it home. Now I've got to do some work to it. I've got to weld some pieces that have rusted out, but a square baler at $150 is just unbelievable. It has wheels and tires and gears and chains and all kinds of moving parts. If we were to take it apart and sell it, the parts are probably worth a couple $1,000s. But the point is, he was glad to get rid of it because he can't make it go, meaning the farm. And his son can't make his farm go. And this equipment is, God bless you, the equipment is rusty. And it used to be, well, let me say one other thing. They had a hay rake also. And he said, well, it's in the back there, and we'll just have to, pull it out of the weeds. So we went out with the truck and got it out of the weeds and hooked it onto a front-end loader and lifted it up and put it on our trailer. And I'm thinking that we bought that for maybe, 10 or 15 cents a pound. Now, what can you buy for 10 or 15 cents a pound? Not much,
big,
right?
That's for sure.
I don't think you can buy potting. You can't buy potting soil for 10 or 15 cents a pound. And here it is. It's a machine. It's got, gears and pulleys and all kinds of intricate parts. And it was $100. So we're going to have to put tires on it and that kind of thing. But we're going to have to work on it, and it's kind of a winter project. But there's a hay rake for $100, and maybe by the time we're done with it, it's going to be $250 total investment. But it's a hay rake. And so what we're seeing, as you said, equipment going down the road, for working in the fields, moving from field to field on trailers or tractors going down the field. And it used to be that farmers would, if you said to a farmer, so what kind of tractor do you have? Well, if it was Ford, it would be a blue tractor. If it was a Massey Ferguson or an International Harvester, it'd be a red tractor. If it was a John Deere, it'd be a green tractor. So, what kind of tractor do you have? Well, green or blue or red. It'd be kind of a way of describing the brands of equipment. Well, now, as I see the equipment going down the road, it's all the same brand. It's all rust-colored. And I'm not exaggerating. So farmers are using old equipment.
But it's true.
Well, it's true, isn't it? Yeah.
It's absolutely true. The other thing that it is that when I'm talking to sheep and wheat farmers who live around here, and bear in mind that most of these people have lived here for many, many, many generations. Some of the families have lived here for 100 or 150 years. There's still some of the original families who established the area still living here. Okay? So it's not like that these people are just starting out and just struggling because, they haven't got their properties established yet or anything like that. No, they've had their properties established for quite a while because their families have been here for maybe 100 or 150 years, which going back in Australian history is going back quite some time. Because the Melbourne area, including this area, which is about 300 kilometres from Melbourne, was not, it wasn't settled until about the 1840s. The other thing that they're facing is that they're saying they can't make any money off of wheat because of the Roundup that they have to buy. And I said, excuse me, can you explain that? And I said, yeah, sure. But they have to spray their crops with Roundup every now and again. And they might have to spray 1,000 or 2,000 acres of paddocks at a time. And they will use 1 IBC cube full of Roundup. That's 1,000 litres of Roundup in each spraying. And I have no idea how much an IBC cube of Roundup costs. I think at the time they said around about $1,500. So, but if you want to do a quick internet search, Vincent, and just get some ballpark range of how much an IBC cube of Roundup costs, that is something that is a significant cost on wheat farmers. And if they don't spray them with the modern wheat varieties, they have no vigor, and they can't compete with the weeds, and the weeds will take over their wheat crop.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I'm trying to find it. I haven't found the price for an IBC cube of 275 gallons or 330 gallons. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm sure it's quite expensive.
It's it might have been about $1,500. It might have been $2,000 or $3,000 for an IBC of Roundup, and they have to do this. The wheat that grows here has about a 12-week life cycle, and they might have to spray every couple of weeks during the early life of that wheat crop. And if you think of how much that they are going to get in return off of that wheat crop, when wheat, sells for maybe $400 or $500 a ton, and there's, the amount of ground that it takes to grow a ton of wheat is around about an acre. Okay, so they might get, 1,000 tons at $400 a ton. So, but once you take in the maintenance costs, once you take in the cost of the Roundup, they're really not making that much money. And also the fertilizers.
Yes,
that's
a big cost. Fertilizer.
It has to be fertilized. because the soil around here is completely pathetic. It's either granite or very, very old volcanic soils, both of which they've got very little nutrition in them. And the indigenous plants are eucalyptuses, and, you know, when they're growing in the soil, they tend to suck the nutrition out of the soil. If anyone out in the class is thinking of growing eucalyptus trees on their farm, I've got a word from the wise for them. Don't. Please don't. Because they change the water systems, they dry out the soil, they make the soil less fertile, and if they get dry, if you have a drought, when you have a drought, they dry out like you wouldn't believe. They, shed this leaf litter, and the leaf litter is almost as flammable as the tree itself. Okay? It's the best tinder you could possibly imagine is eucalyptus leaves, because they combust, because they're, even in their dried up state, they're still full of eucalyptus oil. So they're not a good farm tree, but they're what indigenously grows here. So you sort of have to, around here, you sort of have to shrug and live with it. And but it's gotten to the point where there's particular farmers around here have actually taken to ploughing up their fields, and instead of planting wheat crops and instead of grazing sheep, they've actually sown their paddocks in eucalyptus trees. Because it was what grows here, and at least it's a particular type of eucalyptus, which is called blue mallee, which is actually native to here. It only grows to be about 15 feet tall, and it grows like a gigantic carrot with a huge taproot, and you can cut its leaves easily because they're not tall, and you can turn them into eucalyptus oil. And that they would probably make more money running a eucalyptus still and extracting the eucalyptus oil from their eucalyptus trees than they would from running either sheep or wheat. And the advantage is that they don't have to spray it. They basically don't have to look after it at all once it's sown because it grows here. It's native to here. And all that they have to do is each year go out and go with a trailer and a tractor and a chainsaw and cut the eucalyptus branches, put them into the trailer, take them down to the still, and distill the eucalyptus oil. So it's about thinking intelligently about the farming that you do. And so, you've got to, maybe that's what people will have to do, is to begin to do things in a way that previous generations did them, that didn't cost a whole lot of money. If we could revert back to that way of doing things, because people have been farming cows forever, but they haven't always had a lot of money to spend on them, and yet they still farmed cattle. How did they do it in previous generations? And maybe if we can revert to those ways of managing our livestock, then we can make farming economical again.
Yep. And when we come back, I have that answer about the cost of Roundup. It's staggering, absolutely staggering. We'll be right back. So we've been talking about wheat. We've been talking about the cost of Roundup. And Roundup is at about $20 per gallon, if you buy it in small quantities. Typically a little bit more, but around $20 per gallon. So if you were to extrapolate that out to a 275-gallon cube, IBC cube, that'd be $5,500 for a cube of Roundup. And but if you buy it in a cube, you can get it.
Actually, some farmers were saying that when they were doing their spraying, that they were using 2 and 3 cubes.
Yeah, if you buy it in a cube, you can get it. You can get it for less, a little over $3,750 per cube. That's about the price that Roundup is going to be. Or, a 55-gallon drum, about a little over $750 for a 55-gallon barrel of Roundup, which is absolutely toxic to the planet, as we're finding out, and we've been reporting that for years and years and years. But the point is that farmers on all levels are in financial trouble. And my request to our class is, if you happen to meet someone, whether it be a farmer or someone else, and they seem to be kind of down, why don't you just chat with them and have a talk, and maybe that chat, that little bit of time that you spend with someone who is depressed, might be the little chat that saves their life. It may prevent them from suicide. I think it's that serious. People are killing themselves at record numbers. And, why do people take their lives? Well, typically financial distress. That's what happened during the first Great Depression in the United States. People in New York City were jumping out of windows, killing themselves because they lost so much money so quickly in the stock market crash. They didn't know what to do. So they ended it. And it's the wrong thing to do. So maybe you can help someone just by talking to them. Okay? Making some suggestions. And, they're not alone. They're not alone in this. The MBAs, people who have Masters in Business Administration, my generation, have been a blight. Many MBAs have been a blight on the markets through leveraged buyouts, mergers, acquisitions, laying off people, destroying businesses. And you take the Bill Gates of the world, who were supposed to save the world through computer automation. Well, those computers are being used against us in many ways. There are pluses and minuses, but it's not all good. There are a lot of negatives with computers, like how they're being used to spy and monitor and track and so forth, our every move. It used to be that if the government wanted to spy on us, they'd have to open up our mail, physical mail that we'd send with a stamp from one place to another. They'd have to stop and open it up. Now they can intercept. Actually, they're intercepting all of our mail and storing it. I'm talking about email and messages and phone calls and texts and tweets and. And so if you want to know how bad it is, class, there's a technology that Mark Zuckerberg has applied for, his company has applied for a patent for this technology. And here's what it is. So you see an advertisement on television, and this technology will embed in that advertisement a tone. I'm calling it a tone. Well, we'll call it a frequency. Well, we'll just call it a tone. But you can't hear it. It's above the range that a human can hear. So you don't hear it. That tone then triggers your cell phone, which is probably in your pocket or in the same room or on the table, to start eavesdropping on you and sending whatever you're saying or whatever your cell phone hears in your room to them. Can you imagine that? So you're watching TV, you think everything's harmless, and they just turned on the spy camera, the spy recorder, the spying. Can you imagine that? Mark Zuckerberg. Oh, man, he's a blight, in my opinion, on this planet. He is a blight. Actually, he's probably an intergalactic blight. Mark Zuckerberg and company, Facebook. Hey, we'll be right back. Yeah, everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. During the breaks, I do some farming, and I race out, and during this particular break, I ran out into the barn, moved a vehicle, hooked up a battery charger, a battery desulfator, checked the solar system, and raced back into the studio. So that's kind of what happens here at the farm during the breaks. I try to be really productive. And David in San Francisco, welcome. You're on with Guineith Isaacs.
Hey, morning, Vincent. Guineith. Yeah, I'm glad you were talking about that Roundup there. Man, this whole Monsanto business, I'm originally from St. Louis, and if you remember the Times Beach, that Monsanto was involved in poisoning a whole section of the Merrimack River and Times Beach, Missouri, with the residue from Agent Orange. And they never took responsibility for it. I think the lawsuit took 25 years to settle. They actually built a new wing on the courthouse over in Jackson, Illinois. They fought it and denied people their due. And so this whole Roundup business, where when I was managing an orchard out in Colorado, you had to be trained by the extension agent to even buy it, much less to use it. And now they've got people just acting like it's a candy store, pickup item. It's an amazing scandal that they've kept it on the market. But
David, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Mrs. Finelli, back in the 1990s, wanted to learn more about pesticides and herbicides, and in order to apply them, you had to have a license in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So she went to the classes, and she learned about how deadly and how dangerous these planetary poisons are. And of course, we've never used them, but she wanted to learn more about it, so she went to the classes. And yes, you did have to learn about them in order to be authorized by the government corporation to apply them. And you mentioned Times Beach. You're talking about Times Beach, Missouri. Class, if you go to Wikipedia and just type in Times, T-I-M-E-S, Beach, B-E-A-C-H, Missouri, you'll find out, here's what it says. So, Times Beach, and this is a quote from Wikipedia, Times Beach is a ghost town in St. Louis County, Missouri, in the United States. And once home to more than 2,000 people, the town was completely, let me say it a different way, completely evacuated in early 1983 due to dioxin contamination. It was the largest civilian exposure to dioxin in the country's history.
Yeah, and
so it says in 1985, the state of Missouri officially disincorporated the city of Times Beach. The site of Times Beach now houses a 419-acre state park commemorating U.S. Route 66, famous highway that stretched from Chicago, Illinois, to Los Angeles, California, and passed by the community, as well as the history of the Times Beach area. So, a toxic dump is now a state park.
Yeah, the way they...
David, you are absolutely right.
The way they were discharging it... Yeah, Monsanto used to make Agent Orange, and the dioxin that was left over from the Agent Orange, they didn't know how to legally dispose of it, so they contracted with a guy who would, back in the 70s, you'd have country roads that didn't have enough money to pave the roads, so they would have a guy with oil just spray the dust, and they would end up with kind of an oily road. And so they got this guy to inject the dioxin into the oil, and they would spray it on the town's roads. And all of a sudden, people's horses and dogs and everything, all the critters were dying suddenly. And it was, Times Beach was, it was a pretty little town with those, the houses on stilts right along the Merrimack River, and but they were not politically strong enough to fight Monsanto. But what really caused the Monsanto fight was this same creep that had been poisoning a whole town was using that on horse barns. And there were all the rich girls in Ladue and, the surrounding Chesterfield and whatnot who had, Daddy bought them a horse, and they had them. They poisoned so many horses out there, and, rich daddy's girls were losing their horses, and that was the impetus that went against Monsanto. But they still, if you find out, I believe it was Jackson, Illinois, they took the federal lawsuit across the river over there, and ran that lawsuit for something like 25 years. They had to build a new wing to the side of the courthouse just to store all of the documents. But yeah, it was an amazing crime. I was glad Guineith was talking about the eucalyptus, though. That was what really spurred me to call. Out here in California, we've I think it was 1992 or so, we had a famous fire over in Oakland, and it was called the East Oakland Fire. And those eucalyptus trees were real popular up in this neighborhood, up in the hills.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense, because when those things burn in the summer, they go up like a torch.
Sure.
Well, they'll actually form tornadoes of fire.
Right, yeah.
Just sweep through and just white, just massive fireballs. And these things will travel at over 100 miles an hour. They just go boom, and they'll just wipe everything out in their path.
Yeah, it hits a knot in the wood.
That we've had here in Australia. They're indigenous here, and there's like I say, you can't do away with the flora that's native to your area. You'll collapse the ecology. Actually, the farm that I'm on is regrowing eucalyptus forest. At one time, all the trees were cut down, but they regrew, and because the land was abandoned, because the ecology did collapse. And so when the farmer went away, the eucalyptus trees all regrew from their stumps. We get stumps on this property that are maybe close to 1 metre wide, with regrowth trunks coming up, and the regrowth trunks are maybe 18 inches wide. So this is what they do. But in California, it's been a huge problem, because they have been growing these trees, these eucalyptus trees. They suck the moisture out of the soil, and they actually change the climate of the country that they're growing in into a much drier climate. And as they grow, they form what is called a fire ecology, where there has to be a fire come through about every so many years just for the eucalyptus trees to set seed and regrow. And you can do it one of two ways. You can do it as a controlled burn once every 3 to 5 years, or if you leave the understory and don't collect any of the firewood and just leave it to be, you are going to get a massive, massive, massive bushfire every 20 to 30 years.
Yeah, and it's hot, too. It's oily, greasy hot. And like you're saying, if it hits a knot in the wood, it'll make a fireball that'll fly 90 feet. And out in the Oakland fire, it was real popular to have wooden shake roofs. And so these fireballs would land on the shake roofs. They weren't tar roofs or any kind of fireproof roofs. And man, that whole section just burned up. It was phenomenal. And trying to put them out, narrow, winding little, shady line trees, neighborhoods that were just totally wiped out. Yeah. Hey, well, I appreciate you talking about that.
Yeah.
David, I have a quick question for you.
You've got to think about things differently when you do things in a eucalyptus ecology, and you've got to have, sheet metal roofs of some description.
Sure.
If you're going to live in that ecology.
Yeah, absolutely. What were you saying, Vincent?
David, I have a quick question. I have a quick question for you, David.
Yeah.
When I chat with someone who calls the farm and we talk about whatever it is that's on their mind, I always ask this question, and I have for as long as I've been broadcasting. So I'd like to ask you on the air if it's okay with you, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to.
Sure.
The question is, how can we make this broadcast better? What can we do to make it better?
Well, you do a good, detailed. I'd say you're pretty methodical. Are you looking for new stations, or you're trying to encourage? Because you're seeing.
I'm just talking about I'm talking about content.
I remember. You kind of remind me. You remember Thomas Jefferson had he was looking for the yeoman farmer, the guy who would read Shakespeare at night, go out and farm by day, and So, in a way, I mean, that's what you've always reminded me of. And so if you were to look at your audience, do you do any kind of survey of the audience to find out, like the demographics of each of the stations? Are they in hills? Are they in plains?
I don't.
Are they in rivers?
Yeah, I don't have that I don't have that information. But I was going to do a survey with you and ask you, what we can do to do a better job. Are there any topics that you would like to discuss? Is there a format that you think is better? I mean, what I'm asking for is constructive criticism.
Well, I generally like
and
your show.
as Lee Iacocca,
yeah, go ahead. I hear the music.
I appreciate that. Yeah, as Lee Iacocca once said, when he was taking over Chrysler, we don't want to be the biggest, just the best. And what we want to do is do the best job that we can here for those who are paying attention in class. That's our mission. We don't want to be the biggest, but we want to be the best that we can be. David, is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, well, yeah, just look at the demo.
Guineith Isaacs is with us, and we've been talking about some pretty depressing things like farmers committing suicide and the financial straits that they're in. But it's not just farmers class. It's a lot of people who are in financial distress. And so what I can recommend is that if you don't want to be in financial distress, you need to avoid certain things. You need to avoid debt. You need to avoid buying things that, frankly, you can't afford. And my dad taught me a long time ago that what you do is if you think you need something, you save up for it. And when you have enough money, then you buy it, rather than buy it with other people's money and then pay them interest so you can have it now. And the way I thought about this when I had a job back in the 1970s, if I got a raise back then of maybe 3% a year or 4% a year, which was considered okay. I mean, who gets a raise today, right? So if you got a raise of 3 or 4% a year and interest was 10%, how can you get ahead by buying it and paying 10% interest when your raise is only going to be 3%? It's impossible. So the more you buy, the farther behind you get, the worse. Yeah. So what I do is, let me just talk about Max's law right now. Max's law. And this is something that I live by. And I'm going to have to define it just a little bit. It's very, very simple. In class, I suggest you consider doing this. Just 3 things. Buy the best, pay cash, and take delivery. And if you miss on any one of those things, you've violated Max's law. And you haven't done the best for yourself. Now, buy the best, pay cash, and take delivery. What that really means is, it doesn't mean that you have to buy a Rolls Royce or a Lamborghini or a Maserati or whatever you might think the best is. What that really means is get the best value for you. Okay? The best value. So buy the best value. That doesn't have to be new.
And best suited for your purpose.
If that were the case, yes. If that were the case, that it had to be new, that I'd be violating Max's law all the time. I mean, regularly. I would be a habitual offender of Max's law because most everything I buy is used and old and rusty and needs work. But for me, it's a really good value, the best value I can find. And so when I buy the best, for example, I bought a new car for me. It was a 1996 Mercedes diesel. It had, a couple 100,000 miles on it when I bought it. And that was, in the last couple of years. So to me, that was buy the best. And I paid cash for it. And I took delivery. So if you pay cash for it, what that means is your debt is settled right then and there. Okay? The transaction is settled. Actually, there was no debt, right? You settled that transaction. Both parties are whole. because you paid for it in full. And take delivery means you actually control the ownership. It's under your possession. It's at your location. Now, that's different from putting something on layaway. Layaway, you haven't bought it, you haven't paid for it, they have possession of it, you don't own it. So layaway doesn't work. Take delivery is really simple. You've got to have it in your possession. So let's say you were going to buy silver or gold, and you were going to spend $100. And you said, tell you what, I'm afraid that somebody might steal it from my house, so I'll leave it with the dealer. So you hold on to my silver for me, or my gold. You haven't taken possession. Okay? You violated Max's law. Okay? Buy the best, pay cash, and take delivery. I know Guineith has a bunch of topics on her mind, and we'll get to them right after these breaks. Just a quick comment on an encounter I had with a company called Ryobi, R-Y-O-B-I. And about 20 years ago, we bought a weed whacker or a string trimmer for our farm, and it quit, after about 20 years. And we thought, well, that's okay. I mean, it's lasted for a while. And we looked at others, and we decided to buy another Ryobi. And we did. I did a lot of research, and I wasn't quite convinced it was the same quality as the first one of 20 years ago. And it wasn't. And it failed. It failed. The gear head on it just stripped, and it was rendered useless. So I looked up the parts, and, $17 roughly for the parts. Well, $16.43. I thought, I'll call Ryobi. I called him up and I said, so I bought this. I was very polite. I said, I bought this. I'll tell you what the model is, RY253SS. RY253SS, 25cc weed whacker. And it was built in 2016. We used about 6 tanks of fuel through it, and it failed. So I called him up and I told him that, we had purchased the previous one and we liked it and it lasted a long time, and so we wanted to buy another one from them, and it failed really quickly. They believed me. I talked to a gal by the name of Joy. She believed me and said, I'm going to make a one-time exception. Normally you have to bring it to a dealer. I said, it's a 100-mile round trip. She said, well, okay, we'll send it to you. So she's sending me a gearhead. And I just wanted to say that there are 2 comments I have. 1, Ryobi took care of me. 2, the products aren't as good as they used to be. Okay? So I just wanted to share that. And that's my experience about Ryobi. Guineith, you've got a lot of things to talk about, I know.
Yep. Okay. I was speaking with you earlier, and I wanted to go into extortion rackets disguised as government. But as we were doing the broadcast, I thought of a really, really good way of putting this. Okay? I'm sure that most of the people out there in the class, I know that I've mentioned him before, but I want to mention him again because his life and his work was just so important. A fellow who lived, and died probably close to 100 years ago, and his name was called Mohandas Gandhi. Most people would know him as Mahatma Gandhi, okay? And you know what? He was fighting these same battles that we are fighting today back 100 years ago, okay? He was, one of the battles that he cut his teeth on was, he was in South Africa. He was an Indian, but he was living in South Africa. And, he went to London. He did a law degree at the University of London and was admitted to the bar, went to South Africa, practiced law in South Africa when South Africa was a part of the British Empire. But he was that disgusted with what was happening during the Boer War that he couldn't help but speak up about it. That was the concentration camps and the way that the Boer people were being treated. They have had it hard for a really long time. And it ended up getting too dangerous for him to live in South Africa. So he moved back to India. and came full circle. And that's where we really begin to learn in our popular culture about Gandhi. But the work that he did was really, really important because it ties in with what you were saying in the first part of the broadcast. How do we survive? Well, Gandhi had an answer, and that was that you have to go back to the old way of doing things, okay? The modern mechanized way of doing things is actually designed to enslave you, and it's designed for your farming enterprise to not be profitable. So you need to go back and you need to find out how people did cattle farming, sheep farming, wheat farming in the generation before you, or in the generations before you, before all of this technological world was invented. And you know something? It may be possible. It may be really, really difficult for you because the systems are not there anymore, okay? Now, around here, you can still hire, they call them musterers around here, or mustering gangs. Around there, I think you would call them cowboys. It's groups of people who you hire to take your livestock on the road and walk them to the abattoir, okay? And they do it for a fee. And, maybe you're there. It's really a good idea if you were there with them to make sure they don't walk them off to their own ranch or whatever. But, that's how people used to do things. And Gandhi became famous for, one thing that he did was he adopted a traditional Indian style of dress called the dhoti. And if you look at photos of Gandhi, you'll see him in a dhoti, okay? Now, the other thing that Gandhi had a bee in his bonnet about was he was really, really opposed to government stepping into people's lives and requiring registrations and licenses and taxations for people to do ordinary things that were fundamental to their existence. Now, in his world, in the area of India that he came from, the way that people, especially women, the way that women made their living was they would go out on the salt flat and they would harvest sea salt and they would collect it in great big baskets and they would carry it on their head to the market and they would sell it. And that's how they made their living. And salt, of course, has always been an absolutely vital commodity in this world. And these women, the British government at that time was making it completely uneconomical for these women to do their salt trading because of the taxation. And because the government required them to have a license to collect the salt, and the license fee that they required was so exorbitant that it crippled them, and it sent the whole country into poverty. And if they didn't, then the government felt that it had the right to arrest them and destroy their property. Then you think, well, that's pretty stupid. It's only salt, but you can't live without salt, okay? And for these particular women, it was their livelihood, and especially in a hot climate, salt is a necessity. You will find that you actually become ill very, very quickly in a hot climate if you don't have an adequate supply of salt, But, Gandhi said the woman came to him and said, we're in big trouble here. The government is shutting us down. And Gandhi's response to them was stop paying the tax. Don't pay them. And if we all don't pay them, what are they going to do? Are they going to lock us all up? And so he established something called the Salt Rebellion, okay? And he got the women, he organized them together so that none of them were paying the salt tax. And the British Army came at them the British government actually sent the whole British Army against these women. And of course some of them were killed. Of course some of them suffered terrible atrocities. But at the end of the day, okay, the salt tax was abolished. And ultimately the work of Gandhi ended up in the British being kicked out of India. And the Indian people were basically set free. And they are a free and independent nation to this day, largely because of the work of Mahatma Gandhi and largely because of what he said to the Indian woman on that day when they came to him and said, "Sir, we need your help. What should we do? We can't make a living, and our families are being plunged into poverty and we're dying." And I'm sure some of their husbands must have been committing suicide as well, through them not being able to make a living at doing what they had been doing since the dawn of time, as far as anyone could tell.
Right, and one of the things that you and I have been talking about is, you need to, here at USA Prepares, start your own business. Read Publication 17 from the IRS. Take the same tax deductions the wealthy take. Pay less taxes legally. It's absolutely very simple to do. And if you want a refresher class, I may end up doing one on Friday. I don't know if I have an instructor lined up for both hours on Friday or not, but I may do a class on how to avoid legally paying taxes. And farmers have to do that if they're going to survive. So I'm not talking about anything other than using the legal means to survive, okay, using their rules.
That's right.
And it works. And if you want to see what it's like, just go to YouTube, type in Vincent Finelli, Finelli, and type in extreme tax deductions. Extreme tax deductions. And it'll give you a primer. And we've got Ron in California. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you. This call has been very informative. I've been listening, and my position, I'm out in California. I work with students on a project called KnowWhat'sInIt.org, which they're very much focused on in recent years, glyphosate and its origins with the company that put out DDT and all the fake news about how safe things have been, and why do we question the increases of cancer in this nation without looking at the synthetic chemicals? Am you
Ron,
with me or not?
Yes. Ron, can you hold through the break? It'll just be a few minutes, and you'll be back on. Is that okay?
I'm sorry. I'm about ready to go into a medical meeting, so I'll try to reach you tomorrow or the next day, whenever you're on. I appreciate it.
Go.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, thank you so much. Guineith Isaacs has been talking about Gandhi, and he was assassinated in 1948. He took 3 bullets to the chest and died. Yeah. And
I need to clarify here. Okay, given what you said just before the ads, Gandhi was a barrister. Okay, he would not have advised those women to do anything that was unlawful. Okay. He would have investigated the taxes that the British were demanding that they pay, and he would have found that there was some illegality about them, and that's why he would have advised the woman not to pay them. Okay, and the licenses and the registrations, he would have found some fault with them because he was a barrister. He did believe in the rule of law, absolutely, but he believed that governments could overstep the mark, that they could demand so much from us as people that it was impossible for us to pay, and that we would end up being impoverished and enslaved. And I think that that's the point that we're at now. And when I talk about, when anybody talks about the Gandhi tax protests, they have to remember that he was a barrister and he did believe in the rule of law, And he absolutely did not believe in a violent approach as the first resort. He believed that it was lawful to defend your life and your property, if necessary, by the force of arms. Okay, so because that is a fundamental part of British common law. But he would not have advised people to do anything that was unlawful. But he absolutely always advised people to stand up for their rights, including and especially against rampant, corrupt, extortionate government officials.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And Guineith,
yes.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because here at USA Prepares, I have not said don't pay taxes. We haven't said that. We feel that you should pay what's right, just, legal, and lawful, but no more than that.
Yeah,
we don't believe that.
That's the opinion that he had.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I'm glad that I was able to clarify that in case anybody got the wrong idea about what I was saying, that I was telling. I'm not telling people to do anything that's against the law. But what I am saying is that governments can cross the line and they can go from being lawful governments to extortionate cartels.
Mm-hmm. And when I teach the class on how to avoid paying taxes legally, I'm teaching exactly that, using the laws, the rules, the tax code to the best benefit of the villagers. I'm not saying don't pay taxes. I'm saying pay your taxes. I do. I pay all the taxes that I'm legally required and not 1 cent more. And here's the example. So if I go to the supermarket and I put the items that we're going to buy on that conveyor belt, and the cashier says, okay, that'll be $21.47. I don't say, I'll tell you what, here's $100. Keep the change. I don't do that. I pay exactly the amount that the transaction requires. That's all. No more. No more. Because I'm not required to. So when it comes to paying taxes, I figure out exactly what I'm required to pay, and that is the amount that I pay. I don't say, well, heck, let's round it up by a few thousand more. I don't do that. Why would I do that? It's too hard. It's too hard to earn money around my neck of the woods, so I don't do that. And I suggest that y'all go to YouTube, type in Vincent Finelli, followed by extreme tax deductions, and learn how to do it yourself. It requires starting a business. Starting a business. Yeah.
On Ron Gibson's YouTube channel.
Yes, on the Ron Gibson channel.
Yay, Ron Gibson.
Yay, Ron Gibson. Ron Gibson puts us on YouTube every day. Thanks so much, Guineith and Ron Gibson.